The October wind swept through Chicago's downtown corridor like judgment itself, cold and unforgiving. Sophia Martinez stood on the corner of Michigan Avenue, her thin coat offering no protection against the bite of approaching winter. She was 24 years old, and she had come to sell the one thing she had left. Her reflection stared back from the glass towers surrounding her, dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail, brown eyes that had seen too much worry for someone so young. A face that would have been beautiful if exhaustion hadn't carved shadows beneath her cheekbones. She looked like what she was, a woman who had run out of options. The envelope in her purse felt heavier than paper should. Inside was a contract, 3 pages of legal language that reduced the most intimate act between two people into clauses and conditions. One night, one purpose, $500,000. Sophia had read those pages so many times the words had burned into her memory. She could recite them with her eyes closed, could feel the weight of each sentence pressing down on her chest until breathing became an act of will. Her mother was dying. Stage 4 cancer didn't negotiate. It didn't care that Elena Martinez had spent her entire life working 3 jobs to give her daughter opportunities. It didn't pause because Sophia needed more time to find a solution. It just kept growing, kept spreading, kept stealing away the only person Sophia had ever been able to count on. The experimental treatment existed. Doctors in white coats had explained it with careful optimism, their words dancing around the truth. It might work. It could buy time. It offered hope where traditional medicine had none left to give. But hope, as Sophia had learned, carried a price tag that made her want to scream at the universe for its cruelty. Everything else had been tried first, every loan denied, every grant application rejected, everything she owned had been sold except the clothes on her back and the bed where her mother slept. 2 jobs became 3 as she worked herself to exhaustion, watching the numbers climb while knowing they would never climb fast enough. And then she had found the advertisement. It had appeared on her screen at 3 in the morning during one of those sleepless nights when desperation made her search for things she knew didn't exist. Surrogate wanted, compensation substantial, discretion required, contact below. Sophia had stared at those words until they blurred. She had closed the laptop, walked away, told herself she couldn't possibly consider it. But the next night she had opened it again, and the night after that. Until finally, with shaking hands and a heart that felt like it was tearing in half, she had sent an email. The response had come within an hour. Not from an agency, from a lawyer whose name carried weight even Sophia recognized. The offer was simple, brutally clear, and exactly what she needed. One night with a client who required discretion. The goal was conception. If pregnancy occurred, the payment would be made in full. No further contact would be required. No claim to the child would be permitted. Clean, clinical, transactional. Sophia had thrown up after reading it. Then she had called her mother's doctor to ask how much time they had left without treatment. 6 months, maybe less. She had signed the preliminary agreement the same day. Now she stood outside the Blackwell Tower, looking up at glass and steel that seemed to pierce the gray October sky. Somewhere in that building was the man who had made this offer. Alessandro Blackwell. She had looked him up, of course, had spent hours reading about the CEO who had built an empire from his father's ashes. 38 years old, never married, never photographed with the same woman twice. A face that belonged in old Italian paintings, all sharp angles and calculated control. The articles called him brilliant, ruthless, a man who won every negotiation because he never let emotion cloud his judgment. They said he valued efficiency above all else, that he treated business like war, and came away victorious because he understood that sentiment was a weakness his competitors couldn't afford. Sophia wondered what kind of man reduced fatherhood to a contract. She wondered what kind of woman she had become, that she was willing to give it to him. The lobby doors opened with a whisper of expensive mechanics. Inside, everything was money and power rendered in marble and crystal. The floors reflected light from chandeliers that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Men and women in suits that screamed success moved through the space like they owned the air they breathed. Sophia felt like an intruder. Worse, she felt like what she was. Someone who didn't belong but had come anyway because desperation made beggars of us all. A woman approached. Perfect suit, perfect hair, perfect smile that never reached her eyes. She introduced herself as Mr. Blackwell's assistant, her voice the kind of professional that managed to be both polite and dismissive at once. The top floor, she said. Mr. Blackwell was expecting her. The elevator was private, requiring a key card to access. It rose so smoothly Sophia barely felt the movement, just the mounting pressure in her chest as floor numbers climbed higher. 68, 70, 75. each number taking her further from the ground, from safety, from any possibility of pretending this wasn't happening. When the doors opened, Sophia stepped into another world. The penthouse office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view that made Chicago look small, manageable, conquered. The furniture was minimal in that way that screamed expense. Everything in clean lines and cold surfaces, more art installation than workspace. And behind a desk of wood so dark it was almost black, sat the man who had made this arrangement possible. Alessandro Blackwell. Photographs hadn't done him justice. Or perhaps they had, but seeing him in person added dimensions no camera could capture. He stood as she entered, and even that simple movement carried a quality that made something in Sophia's stomach tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. He was tall, broader through the shoulders than his perfectly tailored suit suggested. His black hair was styled with the kind of precision that came from having staff who understood that even casualness required calculation. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath in her throat. Ice blue. Intense. The kind of eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw, filing away information to be used later when it mattered most. When he looked at her, Sophia felt seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. His voice, when he spoke, was exactly what she'd expected. Deep, controlled, caring authority that made obedience feel inevitable rather than demanded. Miss Martinez, thank you for coming. Sophia nodded because speaking felt impossible. Her fingers tightened around her purse, feeling the envelope inside like a brand against her palm. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. The movement precise, economical. Please sit. She did, grateful because her legs had started to shake. Alessandro returned to his seat, his gaze never leaving her face. For a long moment, neither spoke. Sophia felt like she was being evaluated, measured against some standard she couldn't see. I assume you've read the contract, he said finally. She had, every word, multiple times, looking for traps, for clauses that would make this worse than it already was. But it had been surprisingly straightforward, clinical in its clarity. One night, intercourse with intention of conception, payment upon confirmation of pregnancy, no contact afterward, no claim to the child, no messy complications. Yes, Sophia whispered. Her voice sounded small in the vast space. I've read it, and you understand the terms completely. It wasn't a question, but Sophia nodded anyway. Alessandro leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. Tell me why you need the money. The question caught her off guard. It wasn't in the contract. She could refuse to answer. But something in his gaze made honesty feel necessary, like this moment required truth even if nothing else did. My mother, Sophia said quietly. She has cancer. Stage 4. There's an experimental treatment, but insurance won't cover it. And she swallowed hard, fighting tears that would make her seem weak. I've tried everything else. Something flickered in Alessandro's expression. Too quick to name, but it was there. A crack in the ice. How old are you? 24. Have you done this before? The question hung between them, heavy with implications Sophia wasn't ready to face. Heat rose to her cheeks, a blush she couldn't control. No, she said, barely above a whisper. Never. Alessandro's jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, dropped lower, become somehow more intense. I need to be clear about something, Miss Martinez. This isn't a romantic arrangement. I don't do relationships. I don't do emotional entanglements. What I need is simple. An heir to inherit the Blackwell empire. Someone to carry on what I've built. I'm offering you a substantial sum because this is a business transaction. Nothing more. The words should have made it easier, should have reduced the weight of what she was agreeing to. Instead, they made something in Sophia's chest ache with a loneliness that wasn't entirely her own. I understand, she said. Alessandro pulled a pen from his desk. The movement precise, controlled. If you're certain, if you're absolutely sure this is what you want, then sign here. He pushed the contract across the desk toward her. Sophia stared at the document, at the line where her signature would go, at the promise of money that could save her mother's life. Her hands shook as she reached for the pen. She thought of her mother's face growing thinner each day. Thought of the fear in Elena's eyes when the doctor delivered the latest prognosis. Thought of all the nights spent crying, trying to make impossible numbers work. And then she signed. Alessandro watched her write her name, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he took the contract, glanced at it briefly, then looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Tonight, he said simply. Tonight. The word came out higher than Sophia intended. I have a dinner meeting that will end around 9. Be here at 10. I'll have a car pick you up from wherever you're staying. The clinical nature of it made something inside Sophia want to laugh or cry, or both. She nodded instead. Alessandro stood, signaling the meeting was over. But as Sophia rose on shaking legs, he moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. She had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. One more thing, Miss Martinez. When you're here tonight, leave your nervousness at the door. What we're doing may be a transaction, but I won't have you trembling in fear. If you can't handle this, we can end it now. Sophia forced herself to meet his gaze, to find some core of strength she wasn't sure existed anymore. I can handle it. We'll see. The dismissal was clear, but as Sophia turned to leave, Alessandro's voice stopped her at the door. Miss Martinez. She turned back. Your mother, what's her name? The question surprised her. Elena. Why? Alessandro's expression softened almost imperceptibly. No reason. I'll see you tonight. The ride down felt like falling. Sophia barely remembered leaving the building, barely felt the October wind as it cut through her coat. She walked for blocks without direction, her mind spinning, trying to process what she'd just agreed to. $500,000, enough to save her mother, enough to give Elena Martinez a fighting chance at life. But the cost. Sophia pressed her hand against her stomach, trying to calm the churning there. She had just agreed to sleep with a man she didn't know, to potentially carry his child, to give that child away like it meant nothing. The weight of it hit her all at once. She had to lean against a building, gulping air, fighting panic that threatened to overwhelm her. By the time she made it back to the tiny studio apartment she shared with her mother, Sophia had managed to compose herself into something resembling normal. Elena was sleeping, her frail body barely making an impression in the bed they shared, her breathing shallow and labored even in rest. Sophia sat beside her mother, gently brushing gray hair from her forehead. I'm going to save you, she whispered. I don't care what it costs. The hours until 10 passed like a fever dream. Sophia showered, standing under water as hot as she could stand, as if she could wash away the nervousness, the fear, the complicated knot of emotions she couldn't untangle. She dressed carefully in the only dress she owned that wasn't worn or faded, a simple navy blue sheath her mother had bought her 2 years ago for a job interview. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders. Her brown eyes looked huge in her pale face. The dress, while modest, couldn't hide the curves she usually tried to downplay. At exactly 9:45, her phone buzzed. A black town car waited downstairs. The driver was professional and silent, asking no questions as he navigated through Chicago's evening traffic. The city lights blurred past the window, and Sophia watched them without really seeing, her mind 1,000 miles away. The penthouse was different at night. The floor-to-ceiling windows now reflected the city back on itself, creating an illusion of floating in a sea of lights. Soft illumination from hidden sources gave everything a dreamlike quality, softening the hard edges she'd noticed during the day. Alessandro stood by the windows, his back to her when she entered. He had removed his suit jacket and tie, the first time she'd seen him in anything less than perfect formal attire. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms. Somehow, this small concession to informality made him seem more human and more dangerous at the same time. You came, he said without turning around. Did you think I wouldn't? Sophia found her voice, surprised it came out steady. Alessandro turned to face her. Something in his expression shifted when he saw her. His ice blue eyes traveled slowly from her face down to her feet and back up again. Not leering, but assessing, appreciating. That dress, he said quietly, is perfect. Simple. Elegant. You have excellent taste. It's the only one I have. The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. Alessandro's eyebrows rose slightly. Then we'll have to remedy that, but not tonight. Tonight, you're perfect as you are. He moved toward her with that predatory grace she'd noticed earlier. Sophia had to force herself not to step back. When he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin slightly, he reached out and gently took her hand. You're trembling, he observed. I told you not to be nervous. I can't help it, Sophia admitted. I've never... She stopped, heat flooding her cheeks. Alessandro's grip on her hand tightened slightly. Never what? Done this? Been with anyone? The silence that followed her unspoken confirmation was deafening. Sophia couldn't bring herself to look at his face, afraid of what she'd see there. Disgust, anger that she hadn't disclosed this before. Instead, she felt his finger under her chin, lifting her face until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. You're telling me you're a virgin. It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Yes. Alessandro released her hand, turning away, running his fingers through his perfectly styled hair in what seemed like an uncharacteristic moment of agitation. Christ, he muttered. Sophia felt something inside her break. Why, the contract doesn't specify. I still meet the requirements. He whirled back to face her. There was something new in his expression, something intense and complicated that she couldn't read. Because I'm not a monster, he said roughly. Because taking someone's virginity isn't something to be done as part of a business transaction. Because you deserve better than this. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes. I don't have the luxury of deserving better, Mr. Blackwell. My mother is dying. This is the only option I have left. If you're backing out. She stopped as Alessandro closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that shocked her. I'm not backing out, he said, his voice low and intense. But the terms are changing. Tonight isn't happening. Sophia's stomach dropped. But the contract? Forget the contract, Alessandro interrupted, his thumb stroking her cheekbones in a gesture that seemed unconscious. I need you to understand what you're giving me. Your first time shouldn't be a transaction. It should be. He paused, seeming to struggle with words. It should mean something. But it does mean something, Sophia whispered, tears spilling over. Now, it means my mother gets to live. It means everything to me. Alessandro's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching there. The conflict in his expression was clear. The cold businessman warring with something else, something more human. Here's what's going to happen, he finally said, his voice firm. You're going to stay here tonight, in the guest room. Tomorrow, I'm transferring the full amount to your mother's medical fund. Not as payment for tonight because nothing is happening tonight, but as an advance. Sophia's eyes widened. I don't understand. You will, Alessandro said. But first, tell me about your mother. Tell me about Elena. The request was so unexpected that Sophia didn't know how to respond. They stood there, his hands still cupping her face, the city lights glittering behind him like a universe of possibilities. She's the strongest person I know, Sophia finally said, her voice thick with emotion. She came to this country with nothing, raised me alone, worked 3 jobs to put me through college. She never complained, never asked for anything for herself. And now she's dying, and I can't. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I can't lose her. She's all I have. Alessandro pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her in an embrace that felt nothing like a business transaction. One hand stroked her hair while she cried. The other held her steady. He said nothing, just let her break apart in the safety of his arms. When the tears finally subsided, Sophia pulled back, embarrassed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's all right, Alessandro said gently. Come, let me show you where you'll sleep. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in soft grays and whites, with a bed that looked like it had been made for royalty. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about what happens next. But the contract, Sophia started. Alessandro's smile was small, almost sad. Forget the contract, Sophia. This isn't business anymore. He turned to leave, but Sophia's voice stopped him. Why are you being kind to me? You don't even know me. Alessandro looked back at her. In his ice blue eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. A loneliness that matched her own, a hunger for something real in a world of transactions. Maybe that's exactly why, he said quietly. Good night, Sophia. And then he was gone, leaving her alone in a room that cost more than she'd make in a year. Her mind reeling, her heart pounding. Everything she thought she understood about this arrangement suddenly turned upside down. Sophia barely slept that night. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet, and her mind refused to stop spinning. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Alessandro's hands on her face, heard the gentleness in his voice when he'd held her while she cried. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to be kind. He wasn't supposed to care. When morning light finally filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Sophia found a note slid under her door. The handwriting was strong, decisive, unmistakably masculine. It simply said, "Join me for breakfast when you're ready." The main living area had transformed in daylight. What had seemed cold and imposing at night now glowed with warmth. Sunlight poured through those massive windows, turning the city below into something almost magical. And there, in the kitchen of gleaming stainless steel and dark granite, stood Alessandro Blackwell, doing something that seemed completely at odds with his billionaire CEO image. He was cooking. Good morning, he said, without turning around, somehow knowing she was there. I hope you like omelets. I don't really know how to make anything else. Sophia found herself smiling despite everything. You cook? Badly, Alessandro admitted, glancing over his shoulder with a small smile that transformed his entire face. But I'm functional enough to keep from starving. He plated 2 omelets that actually looked decent, along with fresh fruit and coffee that smelled like heaven. They sat at the island and for a few minutes ate in silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that felt natural between two people who were just beginning to discover each other. Finally, Alessandro set down his fork and looked at her directly. I've been thinking about this all night, about what we're doing, what you need, what I need, and I've come to a conclusion. Sophia's stomach clenched. Here it comes. The moment he tells her he has changed his mind entirely. I don't want one night with you, Alessandro said. His ice blue eyes locked on hers. I want more than that. Sophia's heart stuttered. What do you mean? I mean, Alessandro leaned forward, his intensity palpable, that I'm proposing a different arrangement. You move in here. We give this, he gestured between them, a real chance. If pregnancy happens, it happens. But it won't be the result of one cold transaction. It will be the result of something genuine. The world felt like it had tilted sideways. You want me to move in with you? For how long? Alessandro's jaw tightened slightly. I don't know. A month? 3 months? However long it takes for us to figure out if this, whatever this is real or just chemistry. But I want you to understand something, Sophia. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm still the same man who doesn't do relationships, who keeps people at a distance. I'm offering you honesty and the chance to see if we can be more than a contract. And my mother's treatment? Already being handled, Alessandro said firmly. I made the transfer at 6 this morning. Elena Martinez's medical bills are paid in full, including the experimental treatment. Regardless of what happens between us, that money is hers. Tears stung Sophia's eyes. Why? Why are you doing this? Alessandro's voice dropped lower, rougher. Because when I touched you last night, when I held you while you cried, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Something I thought I'd buried so deep it couldn't resurface. And I want to explore it. I want to know what it is about you that makes me want to break every rule I've set for myself. Sophia's hands shook as she set down her coffee cup. I don't know how to be what you need. You don't need to be anything except yourself, Alessandro said. That's the point. No pretense, no performance, just you and me figuring this out together. The offer was tempting, terrifying, and completely insane. But when Sophia looked into Alessandro's eyes, she saw something there that called to her. A vulnerability he was trying to hide, a hope he was afraid to acknowledge. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll try. Alessandro's smile was slow, genuine, and it transformed him from intimidating billionaire into something dangerously close to irresistible. Good. Then let's start with the basics. Tell me about yourself. Real things, not what you'd put on a resume. So Sophia talked. She told him about growing up in a tiny apartment on the south side, about her mother's stories of Mexico, about dreams of becoming the teacher that had been derailed by medical bills. She talked about her love of old movies and her terrible habit of singing off key in the shower. And Alessandro listened, really listened, asking questions, laughing at her stories, slowly peeling back layers of formality until they were just two people sharing breakfast. Then it was his turn. Alessandro told her about growing up with a father who saw emotions as weakness, about building his empire from nothing after his father died, about the loneliness that came with success. He spoke about late nights in empty offices, about charity galas where he smiled for cameras while feeling nothing inside, about the realization that he'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow at the core. I thought having an heir would fix it, Alessandro admitted. I thought if I had someone to leave all this to, it would give everything meaning. But the truth is I was just trying to fill a void with another transaction. The honesty in his words made Sophia's heart ache. You don't have to be alone. I know you've built walls, but they don't have to stay up forever. Alessandro reached across the island, his hand covering hers. With you, they already feel like they're crumbling. The days that followed had a dreamlike quality. Sophia called her mother from the penthouse, explaining carefully that an anonymous donor had paid for the treatment, that she'd taken a new job that required her to live on site. Elena had cried with relief and gratitude, not questioning too deeply, too overwhelmed by the gift of hope. Alessandro arranged for Sophia's few belongings to be moved to the penthouse. When the boxes arrived, all 3 of them, Alessandro had looked surprised. This is everything? It's all I need, Sophia had replied, and something in his expression had softened. He cleared out half his closet for her clothes, which barely filled a quarter of the space. The next day, a stylist appeared with racks of clothing, designer dresses, casual wear, everything imaginable. This is too much, Sophia protested as the woman laid out options that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Alessandro emerged from his home office, his expression firm. You're living in my world now. You need clothes that fit that world. This isn't about changing you. It's about making sure you're comfortable. The stylist worked magic. Within hours, Sophia had a wardrobe that made her feel like someone else entirely. When she tried on a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves, Alessandro had gone very still. That color, he said, his voice rough. It brings out the gold in your eyes. Keep it. Wear it tonight. We're going to dinner. Sophia's stomach flipped. In public? Alessandro's smile was predatory. I want to show you my world, and I want that world to see you. The restaurant was the kind of place where reservations were booked months in advance, where celebrities dined in shadowed corners and waiters moved like ghosts. Alessandro kept his hand on the small of Sophia's back as they walked through the space. Proprietary and protective at once. She felt eyes on them, felt the weight of speculation and judgment. But Alessandro seemed oblivious to it all, his attention focused entirely on her. You're nervous, he observed once they were seated. Everyone's staring, Sophia whispered. Let them, Alessandro said. You're beautiful. Let them wonder. The meal was exquisite, course after course of culinary art. But Sophia barely tasted any of it, too aware of Alessandro's gaze, too conscious of the way his leg occasionally brushed against hers under the table, too focused on the heat building between them with every passing moment. When they returned to the penthouse, the tension was palpable. Alessandro poured them each a glass of wine, and they stood by the windows looking out at the city lights. I want to kiss you, Alessandro said suddenly, his voice low, but I need you to tell me that's what you want too. Sophia turned to face him, her heart pounding. I want that. Alessandro set down his wine glass and cupped her face in his hands. The gesture was already becoming familiar. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like she'd imagined a first kiss would be. There was no awkwardness, no fumbling, just heat and hunger and something that felt inevitable. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, as if he had all the time in the world to learn the taste of her mouth. Sophia felt her knees go weak, felt herself melting against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. Alessandro groaned against her lips, his arms tightening around her. God, Sophia, what are you doing to me? I don't know, she gasped as his mouth moved to her neck, finding sensitive spots that made her shiver. But don't stop. Alessandro pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged, his ice blue eyes dark with desire. Not yet. When I have you, and I will have you, I want you ready. I want you sure. But I am, Sophia protested, surprised by her own boldness. Alessandro's smile was pained. You think you are, but you've never been touched by a man. You don't know what your body is capable of feeling. And when we finally come together, I want you desperate for it. I want you begging me. The promise in his words sent heat flooding through Sophia's entire body. So instead of taking her to bed, Alessandro spent the next week slowly driving her insane. The kisses came until she couldn't breathe, then stopped. His hands would skate over her curves through her clothes, learning her shape but never going further. Whispers against her ear painted vivid pictures of all the things he wanted to do to her, painting vivid pictures that made her blush and ache. You're torturing me, Sophia accused one night after a particularly intense session on the couch. I'm preparing you, Alessandro corrected, his voice rough with restrained desire. I'm teaching your body to want. And God, it's killing me too. But when I finally have you, when I finally slide inside you, I want you so ready that there's no pain, only pleasure. Sophia couldn't sleep that night. Her body felt alive in ways she'd never experienced. Every nerve ending sensitized, every thought colored with desire. She could hear Alessandro moving around in his bedroom, could imagine him lying awake too, fighting the same battle. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings were spent over breakfast, talking about everything and nothing. Alessandro would leave for his office, but he'd call her during the day, sometimes just to hear her voice. Sophia explored the penthouse, discovering hidden corners and unexpected books. She cooked dinner, simple meals that made Alessandro smile and tease her about showing up his omelet skills. And every night they would end up tangled together on the couch, pushing boundaries a little further each time. Alessandro taught her things about her own body she'd never known. He showed her that her neck was incredibly sensitive, that a certain touch on her inner wrist could make her gasp, that she loved having her hair pulled gently. He was patient, attentive, focused entirely on her responses. You're so responsive, he murmured one night, his fingers tracing patterns on her collarbone. Every touch makes you tremble. Do you have any idea how intoxicating that is? Sophia's mother called regularly, her voice growing stronger with each conversation as the treatment began to work. She wanted to meet Sophia's mysterious employer, to thank whoever had saved her life. Not yet, Sophia kept saying. The lie felt heavy on her tongue. What would her mother think if she knew the truth? That her daughter was living with a man. That this whole arrangement had started as something cold and transactional. It was Alessandro who finally addressed it. They were lying on the couch, Sophia's head on his chest, his fingers combing through her hair. She had been telling him about her mother's latest good news when he spoke. She should come visit your mother. She should come here and see that you're happy. Sophia lifted her head to look at him. You want to meet her? I want her to see that her daughter isn't suffering, Alessandro said. I want her to know that you're cared for. The word love hovered unspoken between them, too big and frightening to name yet, but it was there in the way Alessandro looked at her, in the tenderness of his touch, in the smile he saved only for her. Okay, Sophia said, I'll invite her. Elena Martinez arrived on a Saturday. Sophia had never been more nervous. Her mother stood in the penthouse lobby, her thin frame swimming in clothes that had once fit, her gray hair covered by a colorful scarf, her eyes taking in everything with wonder. Mija, she breathed, pulling Sophia into a tight embrace. You look so healthy, so happy. And then Alessandro appeared. Sophia held her breath, but her mother's reaction surprised her. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. You, she said simply, you're the one who saved my life. Alessandro's expression was unreadable. I'm glad the treatment is working, Mrs. Martinez. Elena reached out and took his hand in both of hers. No amount of thanks will ever be enough, but please know that you've given my daughter the greatest gift. Her mother. Alessandro's throat worked. It was my pleasure. Over lunch, which Alessandro had catered from an upscale Mexican restaurant in honor of Elena, Sophia watched the two most important people in her life interact. Alessandro was attentive to her mother, asking about her treatment, her history, her life. Elena, despite her weakened state, had that maternal intuition that saw everything. After the meal, she pulled Sophia aside while Alessandro took a phone call. He loves you, Elena said simply. Sophia's eyes widened. Mom, it's not like that. We're just... Mija, her mother interrupted gently. I'm dying, but I'm not blind. That man looks at you like you're his entire world, and you look at him the same way. But it's complicated, Sophia whispered. It started as something else. Something business. Elena cupped her daughter's face. I don't care how it started. I care how it is now. And right now, I see two people who have found something rare. Don't let fear make you throw that away. When her mother left, pressed into a car service Alessandro had arranged to take her home safely, Sophia felt like something had shifted. Alessandro found her standing by the windows staring out at the city. What did your mother say to you? He asked, coming to stand beside her. That you love me, Sophia said quietly. Alessandro went very still. And what did you say? I didn't say anything, Sophia turned to face him, because I needed to hear it from you first. Alessandro's jaw clenched. You know I'm not good at this. At feelings. At words. Then show me, Sophia challenged. Alessandro's response was to pull her into his arms and kiss her, with a desperation that stole her breath. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I've never said those words to anyone, he admitted roughly. I don't know if I'm capable of the kind of love you deserve. But what I feel for you, it terrifies me. It consumes me. From the moment you walked into my office, I haven't been able to think about anything else. That's love, Alessandro, Sophia whispered. That terrifying, consuming feeling. That's exactly what it is. I love you, Alessandro said, and his voice broke on the words. God help me. I love you, and I don't know what to do with it. Sophia kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Then let me show you. That night, everything changed. Alessandro led her to his bedroom, to the massive bed she'd never entered before. The room was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Are you sure? Alessandro asked one last time, his hands framing her face. Because once I have you, once I make you mine, I'm never letting you go. I'm sure, Sophia whispered. I've never been more sure of anything. Alessandro undressed her slowly, reverently, his hands trembling slightly as he revealed her body inch by inch. When she stood before him completely bare, vulnerable in a way she'd never been with anyone, he just looked at her. You're perfect, he breathed. Absolutely perfect. Then it was Sophia's turn to undress him. her inexperienced hands fumbling with buttons and belt until Alessandro helped her, patient and gentle. When he stood before her, she couldn't help but stare. He was beautiful, all lean muscle and controlled power. Alessandro lifted her onto the bed, covering her body with his own. The weight of him, the heat, the smell of his skin, all of it overwhelmed her senses. He kissed her deeply, his hands exploring her body with a patience that made her writhe. "I've got you," Alessandro murmured against her lips. "I'm going to make this so good for you. Trust me." "I do," Sophia gasped as his mouth moved lower, finding sensitive places that made her cry out. When he finally settled between her thighs, his ice-blue eyes locked on hers. "This might hurt at first, but I promise, I'll make it good. Tell me to stop if you need to." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. Alessandro kissed her as he pressed forward. Slowly, so slowly she wanted to scream. The pressure built, unfamiliar, strange. Then a sharp moment that made her breath catch, made her fingers dig into his shoulders. He stopped, completely still despite the tension she could feel vibrating through his entire body. "Breathe," he whispered against her mouth. "Just breathe." She did, and the sharp edge softened, faded, became something else entirely. And then he was there, completely connected to her in a way that made tears spring to her eyes. "Breathe," Alessandro coached, holding perfectly still despite the tension in his entire body. Just breathe through it. The discomfort faded, replaced by a feeling of fullness, of rightness. Sophia experimentally moved her hips and Alessandro groaned. "God, Sophia, you feel—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, he began to move, slow and careful, watching her face for any sign of pain. But there was no pain, only pleasure that built with each movement, spiraling higher and higher until Sophia thought she might shatter from the intensity of it. Alessandro made love to her with a focus and intensity that left no doubt about his feelings. His hands were everywhere, learning her body, finding spots that made her gasp and arch beneath him. His mouth followed, tasting her skin, whispering words against her heated flesh that made her blush and burn. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough with desire. "So perfect. Made for me." The pleasure built slowly, a tide rising within her that she didn't know how to control. Alessandro seemed to sense it, adjusting his rhythm, the angle of his hips, until suddenly Sophia felt something inside her shatter. She cried out his name, her body convulsing around him, pleasure washing through her in waves that seemed endless. Alessandro followed her over the edge moments later, his face buried in her neck, her name a prayer on his lips. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts pounding, skin slick with sweat. Alessandro held her close, pressing kisses to her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Did I hurt you?" Sophia could barely form words. "That was—" She paused, searching for something adequate. "I had no idea it could be like that." Alessandro's smile was satisfied, possessive. That was just the beginning. We have all night. And he meant it. Over the hours that followed, Alessandro took her again and again, each time different, each time pushing her to new heights of pleasure. He was patient and thorough, teaching her body things she'd never imagined, showing her that intimacy could be playful and intense, tender and raw. By the time dawn broke through the windows, Sophia was exhausted and exhilarated, her body marked by his touch, her heart completely his. She lay in Alessandro's arms, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "What are you thinking?" Alessandro asked, his voice rough from use. "That I never want to leave this bed," Sophia admitted. "That I want to stay here with you forever." Alessandro's arms tightened around her. "Then stay. Move into this room. Sleep beside me every night. Wake up in my arms every morning." Sophia lifted her head to look at him. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Alessandro said, echoing her words from earlier. "You're mine now, Sophia, and I don't share." The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her, but instead it sent a thrill through her entire body. "I'm yours," she agreed, "always." The weeks that followed were a revelation. Sophia officially moved into Alessandro's bedroom, her things mingling with his in a way that felt natural and right. They fell into new rhythms, sleeping tangled together, waking to make love in the soft morning light. Alessandro took her to work events, introducing her not as an employee or arrangement, but as Sophia, his tone making it clear she was important, that she mattered. The business world speculated endlessly. Alessandro Blackwell, the man who never dated, suddenly appeared everywhere with the same woman. Gossip columns ran photos of them leaving restaurants, attending charity galas, walking through parks hand in hand. Let them talk, Alessandro said when Sophia expressed concern. Their opinions don't matter. About 6 weeks after their first night together, Sophia felt nauseous. She dismissed it as bad sushi from lunch. But when the nausea persisted for 3 days, Alessandro insisted she see a doctor. The penthouse doctor, who Alessandro kept on retainer, examined her thoroughly. When he emerged from the bedroom where Sophia waited, his expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Blackwell, the doctor said, congratulations. Miss Martinez is pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia, who had followed the doctor out, went pale. But we've been careful, she whispered. Most of the time, the doctor coughed discreetly. These things happen. Based on the symptoms and timeline, I'd estimate about 6 weeks along. The doctor left shortly after, promising to send over prenatal vitamin recommendations and names of excellent obstetricians. Alessandro and Sophia stood in the living room, staring at each other. I'm pregnant, Sophia whispered, the reality of it hitting her. We're having a baby. Alessandro crossed to her in 3 long strides, his hands cupping her face. Yes, we are. Sophia searched his expression for any sign of regret, of anger, of the cold businessman who had originally proposed this arrangement. But all she saw was wonder, and something that looked like joy. Are you happy? She asked tentatively. Happy? Alessandro pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her protectively. Sophia, I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But yes, I'm happy, more than I knew I could be. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. I love you. I love you too, Alessandro said, kissing her gently. Both of you. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Sophia was sick for weeks, barely able to keep food down. Sophia bent to pick up a dropped pen. Alessandro appeared from nowhere, one hand on her elbow, the other already dialing. I'm fine, she said. You winced. I bent over. Normal people wince when they bend over pregnant. His phone stayed at his ear. Dr. Morrison? Yes, she winced. She finally had to sit him down and explain that pregnancy, while uncomfortable, wasn't a crisis requiring constant medical intervention. I just need you, she told him. Not a team of specialists. Just you. Alessandro relaxed slightly after that, though he still treated her like she was made of glass. He attended every doctor's appointment, his hand gripping hers as they watched the ultrasound screen, seeing the tiny fluttering heartbeat that was their child. That's our baby, Alessandro said, his voice full of awe. That's our daughter or son. When Sophia's stomach began to show, Alessandro couldn't keep his hands off her. He was constantly touching her belly, talking to the baby, marveling at the changes in her body. You're so beautiful like this, he would say, kissing her rounded stomach, growing our child, carrying our future. Sophia had never felt more loved, more cherished. But as the pregnancy progressed, old fears began to surface. What if she wasn't a good mother? What if Alessandro eventually regretted tying himself to her? What if the baby changed everything between them? Alessandro found her crying in the nursery they'd begun to set up, surrounded by paint samples and furniture catalogs. What's wrong? He asked immediately, concerned. What if I can't do this? Sophia sobbed. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if you realize you made a mistake? Alessandro pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried. Listen to me. You're going to be an amazing mother. You're kind and patient and strong. Our child is lucky to have you. And as for me realizing I made a mistake, he tilted her face up to look at him. Sophia, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Wait, no, I haven't asked yet. Before Sophia could process his words, Alessandro was on one knee in the middle of the half-finished nursery. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Sophia Martinez, he began, his voice shaking slightly. You came into my life when I thought I had everything figured out. You showed me I knew nothing. You taught me that love isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength. You're having my child, but more importantly, you've given me a reason to be a better man. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and our family? Yes, Sophia whispered, then louder. Yes. Alessandro slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her with such tenderness that fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. We're getting married, he said against her lips. We're having a baby. We're building a life. I know, Sophia laughed through her tears. It's terrifying and perfect. Just like us. They were married a month later in a small, intimate ceremony. Sophia's mother was there, healthy enough to attend, crying tears of joy. Alessandro's few close friends came, looking shocked but pleased to see him so happy. Sophia wore a simple white dress that accommodated her growing belly, and Alessandro couldn't take his eyes off her. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, he whispered as they stood at the altar. I love you, Sophia whispered back. Forever. Their daughter was born on a cold January morning. After 12 hours of labor, during which Alessandro held Sophia's hand and refused to leave her side even when the nurses suggested he might want to step out, Isabella Elena Blackwell entered the world screaming her displeasure at being evicted from her comfortable home. The moment they placed that tiny red-faced bundle on Sophia's chest, Alessandro Blackwell, the man who had built an empire on cold calculations and ruthless business decisions, broke down completely. Tears streamed down his face as he stared at his daughter, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch her impossibly small fingers. She's perfect, he breathed, his voice cracking. She's ours. The nurse handed him surgical scissors, and with shaking hands, Alessandro cut the umbilical cord, the symbolic severing of one connection in the formation of another. When the nurses took Isabella to clean her up and check her vitals, Alessandro turned to Sophia. His face was wet with tears he made no effort to hide. Thank you, he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. Thank you for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Sophia was too exhausted to speak, too overwhelmed by the tidal wave of emotions coursing through her. But she managed to smile, to reach up and touch his face, to let him know without words that this moment, this family, was everything she had never dared to dream of either. Isabella weighed 6 pounds and 7 ounces. She had Alessandro's dark hair and what the nurses promised would be Sophia's brown eyes once they changed from newborn blue. She was perfect in that way that all babies are perfect, tiny and fragile and utterly dependent. And she had 2 parents who looked at her like she had hung the moon and stars. The first months were a blur of sleepless nights and infinite tenderness. Alessandro, who had commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals with ice in his veins, was brought to his knees by a 7-pound baby. He would hold Isabella for hours, just watching her sleep, his ice-blue eyes soft with an emotion he had never known existed. I didn't know I could feel this much, he admitted one night. Isabella asleep on his bare chest, her tiny fist clutching his finger. I didn't know my heart could expand like this. Sophia watched them from the doorway, her own heart so full it hurt. That's what love does. It makes room for more. Alessandro looked up at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. I love you both so much it terrifies me. What if something happens? What if I can't protect you? Nothing's going to happen, Sophia said, moving to sit beside them. We're safe, we're together, that's all that matters. But Alessandro's fears weren't entirely unfounded. Being married to one of Chicago's most powerful men came with complications Sophia hadn't fully anticipated. There were photographers who tried to catch glimpses of the baby, security concerns that required constant vigilance, social obligations that Sophia found exhausting, even before factoring in the demands of new motherhood. Elena visited often, her health stable thanks to the treatment that continued to work beyond anyone's expectations. She would hold her granddaughter for hours, tears in her eyes, grateful for times she had thought she would never have. Grateful to see her daughter happy, settled, loved. You gave me this, she told Alessandro during one visit. This time with my daughter and granddaughter. I'll never be able to thank you enough. You gave me Sophia, Alessandro replied simply. We're even. When Isabella was 4 months old, Sophia had to attend her first major charity gala as Mrs. Blackwell. She had been to smaller events before, but this was different. This was the kind of gathering where Chicago's elite came to see and be seen, where $1,000 a plate was just the entry fee, and the real currency was status and influence. Sophia wore a gown that had been custom-made for her post-pregnancy body, deep burgundy silk that made her skin glow. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, her makeup done by a professional who had worked with actresses and models. She looked the part of a billionaire's wife, but inside she still felt like that desperate girl who had walked into the Blackwell Tower with nothing but hope and fear. The ballroom was everything excess could buy. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most houses, flower arrangements that looked like works of art, tables set with china and silver that gleamed under carefully positioned lights, and everywhere people. Beautiful people in beautiful clothes, moving through the space like they owned the very air they breathed. Alessandro kept his hand on the small of Sophia's back as they moved through the crowd, introducing her, smiling for photographs, playing the role of devoted husband with an ease that made it clear this was his world. He had been born into it, built upon it, mastered it completely. Sophia tried to match his confidence, tried to remember everything the etiquette coach had taught her about which fork to use and how to make small talk that said nothing while sounding engaged. But she could feel eyes on her, could sense the speculation. the judgment. She excused herself to use the restroom, needing a moment away from the scrutiny. The bathroom was as opulent as everything else. All marble and gold fixtures and fresh flowers that probably cost more than Sophia used to make in a week. She was washing her hands when she heard them. Two women hidden in the lounge area just beyond the main bathroom, their voices carrying through the space with crystal clarity. "Did you see her dress?" The first voice dripped with disdain. "So obvious. She's trying too hard." "Well, what do you expect?" The second woman laughed. She was a nurse or something before she trapped him. "She has no idea how to navigate this world. I heard the pregnancy was intentional, that she got herself knocked up to secure the ring." Sophia stood frozen at the sink, her heart pounding. She had known people thought these things, had seen the looks, the whispers that stopped when she entered a room. But hearing it said aloud, hearing the contempt in their voices, made it real in a way that hurt more than she had expected. "Alessandro could have had anyone," the first woman continued. "Any woman in this room would have married him in a heartbeat, and he chose that. It's embarrassing. Maybe he felt sorry for her." The second woman's voice was cruel. "Charity case with a pretty face. How long do you think it will last?" Sophia wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to go back in time and tell that desperate girl not to walk through those doors, not to sign that contract, not to fall in love with a man whose world would never truly accept her. But then she thought of Isabella, of Alessandro, of the life they had built together, and something inside her hardened into steel. She walked out of the bathroom with her head high. The two women were standing in the lounge area, perfectly coiffed and dripping with jewelry that could have fed families for years. When they saw her, their faces went white, their eyes wide with the realization that she had heard everything. Sophia met their gazes without flinching, said nothing, just let them sit with their shame and their fear. Then she walked past them and back into the ballroom. But the words followed her, colored the rest of the evening, made her see every smile as false, every compliment as veiled insult. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Sophia felt like she was holding herself together with nothing but willpower and pride. Alessandro noticed immediately. He always noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked, loosening his tie. "The gala couldn't have been that bad." Sophia debated telling him. Didn't want to burden him with her insecurities. Didn't want to sound petty or weak. But they had promised each other honesty. "Some women at the event," she began carefully, "they said things about how I don't belong in your world, about how I trapped you." Alessandro's expression went cold, dangerous, the kind of cold that had made competitors back down and business rivals think twice. "Who? It doesn't matter," Sophia said quickly. "They're probably right anyway. I don't know how to navigate your world. I make mistakes. I'm not what people expect when they think of Mrs. Alessandro Blackwell." Alessandro crossed to her in two strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Look at me." When she did, his eyes were blazing with an intensity that took her breath away. "You are my wife, the mother of my child. You belong anywhere I am because I choose you. Those women, whoever they are, they're jealous and small. Their opinions mean nothing." "But maybe they have a point," Sophia whispered. "You could have had anyone. Someone who knew this world. Who could be the perfect society wife?" "I don't want perfect," Alessandro said fiercely. "I don't want someone who knows how to play society games. I want you. Real, honest, beautiful. You. Don't let their poison make you doubt what we have." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Sometimes I feel like I'm still that girl outside your tower, looking up at something I can never reach." Alessandro pulled her against him, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You're not outside anymore. You're at the center of everything. You're my home." The incident made Alessandro more protective, more public in his affection. At the next social event, he kept his arm around Sophia's waist the entire evening, introduced her to everyone with obvious pride, made it clear through every gesture and word that she was the most important person in the room. When Sophia excused herself to get champagne and overheard similar whispers near the bar, Alessandro appeared at her side as if summoned. His timing was too perfect to be coincidence. He must have been watching, waiting. "Gentlemen, ladies." His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were ice. "I believe you were discussing my wife." The group went silent, faces pale. The kind of fear that comes from realizing you have made a very costly mistake. Alessandro continued, his voice never rising, never losing that veneer of politeness that somehow made his words more terrifying. "Let me be very clear. Sophia is the best thing that ever happened to me. She's intelligent, compassionate, and stronger than anyone in this room. She came from nothing and built herself into someone extraordinary. While some of you were born into wealth and privilege and accomplished nothing of value with it, She was working 3 jobs and putting herself through college. If anyone has a problem with my choice of wife, they're welcome to take it up with me directly. But I warn you, I don't take kindly to anyone disrespecting what's mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Alessandro took Sophia's hand and led her away, leaving the group to contemplate the wisdom of insulting the wife of a man who could destroy careers with a phone call. Word spread quickly. The whispers didn't stop entirely, but they became more cautious, more hidden. People learned that insulting Sophia Blackwell was a guaranteed way to make an enemy of one of Chicago's most powerful men. And while they might not respect her background, they respected his power enough to keep their mouths shut. As Isabella grew from infant to baby to toddler, the penthouse filled with toys and laughter. Sophia watched Alessandro transform in ways that still took her breath away. The cold CEO who had terrified competitors now spent his evenings on the floor playing peekaboo. The man who had valued efficiency above all else would rush home from meetings to give his daughter her bath. Who would read her stories in different voices that made Sophia laugh until her sides hurt? "You're spoiling her," Sophia teased one evening, watching Alessandro carefully select the perfect stuffed animal from Isabella's overflowing collection. "She's not even a year old. She doesn't understand yet." "I'm making up for lost time," Alessandro said, turning to look at her with those ice blue eyes that had lost their coldness, making sure she knows she's loved every single day. Sophia's heart squeezed. "You're going to be that dad, aren't you? The one who can't say no." Alessandro grinned, unrepentant. "Absolutely." When Isabella was 8 months old, Alessandro came home early one afternoon, his expression serious in a way that made Sophia's stomach clench with worry. She was playing on the floor with the baby, building towers of soft blocks that Isabella delighted in knocking down. "What's wrong?" Sophia asked immediately. Alessandro sat beside them on the floor, which was unusual enough to confirm that whatever he needed to say was important. "I need to tell you something. The original contract, the one you signed, I never destroyed it." Sophia's stomach dropped. The contract, that piece of paper that had started everything. She had almost forgotten about it in the happiness of the past year. "Why not?" Alessandro's jaw tightened. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that if things fell apart, I'd need legal protection. But I don't want it anymore. I don't want any reminder that what we have started is a transaction." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, the original contract inside, the paper that had brought them together but now represented everything they had moved beyond. "I want you to destroy it," Alessandro said, "or keep it, whatever you need. But I need you to know that I don't see you as an agreement anymore." "I never really did. Even from that first night, when you told me you were a virgin and I changed everything, I was already seeing you as more than a transaction." Sophia took the envelope with shaking hands. She remembered signing this document, remembered the fear and desperation, remembered thinking it was the end of one life and the beginning of something cold and clinical. She had been so wrong. She stood, walking to the fireplace that they rarely used. Alessandro followed. Isabella balanced on his hip, watching with the solemn interest babies have for things they don't understand. Without hesitation, Sophia threw the contract into the fireplace. Alessandro handed her a lighter, and she watched as flame caught paper. The words that had defined their beginning, curling and blackening, turning to ash. They stood together, watching it burn. Isabella between them, babbling happily, unaware that her parents were symbolically destroying the document that had brought them together but no longer defined what they had become. "It's gone," Sophia said when nothing remained but ash. "And I'm glad, because what we have now is real. It's ours, and it has nothing to do with that contract." Alessandro kissed her, soft and sweet, while Isabella grabbed at both their faces with her tiny hands. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Alessandro scaled back his work hours dramatically. He delegated more, refused to miss important moments with his family. First words, first steps, first everything. He was there, present, engaged in a way that shocked his business associates and delighted his wife. Sophia went back to school part-time to finish her teaching degree. Alessandro insisted she shouldn't give up her dreams just because she was now a wife and mother. He hired a nanny to help during the hours Sophia was in class, though both parents tried to handle most of the childcare themselves. They bought a house outside the city, a place with a yard where Isabella could play, with trees to climb and grass to run through. Though they kept the penthouse for nights when they didn't want to leave Chicago, the house became their real home. The place where they were just a family, not a billionaire CEO and his wife. On their first wedding anniversary, Alessandro arranged for Elena to babysit and took Sophia back to a small cafe in Soho. Not the one where they had first met, Sophia realized, because there had never been a cafe. That had been the penthouse office, cold and intimidating. But Alessandro had found a place that felt right, intimate and warm, the kind of spot where they could talk without performance. A year ago, Sophia said, looking at him across the small table, I was terrified. I thought I was selling myself to a stranger. And instead, I found my life. A year ago, Alessandro replied, reaching for her hand, I thought I had everything figured out. Thought I could have an heir without the complications of love. You proved me wrong about everything. They ordered wine and dessert, talked about Isabella's latest achievements, about Sophia's classes, about Alessandro's plans to step back even further from the company. They talked like any couple celebrating an anniversary, finding joy in the ordinary details of shared life. When they returned home, Elena handed Isabella over with a knowing smile. She was perfect, just like her parents. After Elena left, Alessandro and Sophia put Isabella to bed together. It was their nightly ritual, one they both cherished. Alessandro sang softly in Italian, lullabies his mother had sung to him before she died, before his father had turned cold and distant. Sophia watched him with their daughter, marveling at how far they had both come. Later in their bedroom, Alessandro pulled Sophia into his arms. Thank you. For what? For everything. For walking into my office that day. For signing a contract you shouldn't have had to sign. For giving me a chance to be more than the cold bastard I thought I had to be. For loving me even when I didn't know how to love you back. Sophia pulled back to look at him. You've always known how to love me. You just needed permission to admit it. Alessandro kissed her, slow and deep, with the kind of passion that had never faded despite the demands of parenthood and daily life. I love you. More than I knew it was possible to love someone. I love you too, Sophia replied. Forever. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the heat of desire that hadn't dimmed. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first terrifying meeting to this moment of perfect contentment, it had been a path neither could have predicted. The second year of their marriage brought new challenges and joys. Isabella began to walk, her first steps taken between her parents in their living room, both of them crying and laughing as she toddled forward on unsteady legs. Alessandro was there for every milestone, refusing to let work keep him from watching his daughter grow. Sophia completed her teaching degree and began working part-time at a school in a lower-income neighborhood. Alessandro had offered to fund a private school where she could work, but Sophia had refused. I want to work where I'm needed, she had explained, where I can make a real difference. Alessandro understood, even admired her for it. Though he insisted on providing security given the neighborhood, they compromised on discreet protection that didn't interfere with her work. The children in Sophia's class adored her. She would come home with stories that made Alessandro smile, stories of kids who reminded him of Sophia herself. Bright and determined, despite circumstances that tried to hold them back. She was making a difference, just as she had always wanted, but not everything was perfect. Alessandro's father's old business partners, men who had built empires alongside the senior Blackwell, began to question Alessandro's priorities. You're going soft, one said at a board meeting, too focused on family, not enough on expansion. Alessandro's response was calm but firm. My family is my priority. If that's a problem, you're welcome to sell your shares. The man backed down, but the message was clear. Not everyone approved of the changes in Alessandro Blackwell. One evening, Sophia found him on the terrace of their house, staring out at the darkening sky with a drink in his hand. It was unlike him. He rarely drank alone, rarely brooded. What's wrong, she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Alessandro sighed, leaning back into her embrace. Sometimes I wonder if I'm failing. Not at being a husband or father, I know I'm good at that, but at business, at being the ruthless CEO everyone expects. You're not failing, Sophia said firmly. You're evolving. You're building something better than what your father built. An empire with a heart. But what if it's not enough? Alessandro turned to face her. What if the company suffers because I'm not willing to make the hard, cold decisions anymore? Then we adapt, Sophia said. We find a way to be successful without sacrificing who you've become. Because the man you are now, the one who rushes home to read bedtime stories, who cries at his daughter's first steps, who loves openly and honestly, that's the man I fell in love with. And he's worth more than any business empire. Alessandro pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. How did I get so lucky? You didn't get lucky, Sophia teased. You got stubborn. You refused to let me walk away after one night. Alessandro laughed, the tension leaving his shoulders. Best decision of my life. When Isabella was 18 months old, Sophia discovered she was pregnant again. The news came as a surprise. They had been careful, or thought they had been, but life, as Sophia was learning, had a way of giving you what you needed rather than what you planned. Alessandro's reaction was pure joy. He picked Sophia up and spun her around despite her protests, laughing like a child himself. Another one. We're having another baby. Isabella is going to be a big sister, Sophia said, still processing the news. She'll be amazing at it, Alessandro said confidently. Just like you're amazing at everything. This pregnancy was easier than the first. Sophia's body knew what to expect. The morning sickness was milder, the exhaustion less overwhelming, and Alessandro, already an experienced father, was somehow even more attentive than before. At night, he would talk to both children, Isabella pressing her ear to Sophia's stomach, trying to hear her baby brother. They had found out it was a boy this time. Alessandro had cried at the ultrasound, overwhelmed by the thought of a son. Lucas, Sophia had said, we should name him Lucas. After my grandfather, Alessandro had whispered, remembering the one man in his family who had shown him genuine kindness before he died. Yes, Lucas Alessandro Blackwell. On their third anniversary, 3 months into Sophia's pregnancy, Alessandro surprised her with a proposal. Not of marriage this time, but something else. I want to renew our vows, he said over breakfast. Real vows this time, not the quick ceremony we had when you were pregnant with Isabella. A celebration with everyone we love, with our children present, with words that reflect what we've built together. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. When? This summer, at the lake house. Just family and close friends. Will you marry me again, Sophia? Will you stand with me and promise forever? Not because of any contract or agreement, but just because we choose each other? Yes, Sophia whispered. 1,000 times yes. They planned the vow renewal for July, a small ceremony in the garden of their lake house. Elena was healthy enough to attend, her cancer still in remission against all odds. She would hold Lucas when he was born, would watch her daughter marry the man who had saved her life in more ways than one. Isabella, at 2 years old, was obsessed with being a flower girl. She practiced walking down imaginary aisles, scattering imaginary petals, taking her role with the utmost seriousness. Lucas Alessandro Blackwell was born in early May. Unlike his sister, he came quickly. Sophia's water broke at 3 in the morning, and by noon they had a son, 7 pounds and 2 ounces. Dark hair like his father, brown eyes like his mother, and a temperament that was already calmer, gentler than Isabella's had been. Alessandro cut the cord again, his hands steadier this time, but his tears just as plentiful. A son. He had a son, the heir he had once thought he needed, born not from a contract but from love. Isabella met her brother that afternoon. She climbed into the hospital bed beside Sophia, peering at the tiny bundle with fascination. Baby Lucas, she said solemnly. I protect him. Yes, you will, Alessandro said, kissing the top of her head. You're going to be the best big sister. The vow renewal took place on a perfect July afternoon. The garden at the lake house was transformed with white flowers and simple elegance. Nothing ostentatious, just beauty and love and family. Sophia wore a dress of cream silk, simple and flowing, accommodating her post-pregnancy body. Isabella wore a matching flower girl dress and took her duties very seriously, walking down the aisle scattering rose petals with intense concentration. Elena sat in the front row, holding baby Lucas, tears already streaming down her face. Alessandro stood at the end of the aisle, watching Sophia walk toward him. He wore a simple suit, no tie, looking relaxed and happy, in a way that still took people who knew his reputation by surprise. When Sophia reached him, he took her hands, and they turned to face each other. The officiant stepped back, allowing them to speak the vows they had written themselves. Sophia went first, her voice clear and strong, despite the tears. Alessandro, when I walked into your office 3 years ago, I was broken and desperate. I thought I was signing away a piece of myself to save my mother. But what I actually did was find myself. You've shown me what it means to be loved completely, to be seen and valued for exactly who I am. You've given me a family, a purpose, a life beyond anything I imagined possible. I promise to love you not just today, but every day, through the easy moments and the hard ones, through the celebrations and the struggles. I choose you, Alessandro. I will always choose you. Alessandro's turn came, and his voice was rough with emotion. Sophia, I built an empire before I met you. I had everything the world says a man should want, but I had nothing that mattered. You taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength. You showed me that being vulnerable isn't a liability. It's a gift. You gave me a family, taught me how to be a father, how to be a partner, how to be human. I was a man who knew how to acquire things, but not how to cherish them. You taught me the difference. I promise to spend every day proving that you can trust me with your heart, that you didn't make a mistake when you gave me a chance. I love you more than success, more than empire, more than anything in this world except our children, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. They exchanged new rings, simple bands engraved with coordinates, not of the Blackwell Tower where they had first met, but of that cafe in Soho where they had celebrated their first anniversary, a place that represented not their beginning, but their choice to continue. When they kissed, Isabella clapped enthusiastically. Lucas slept peacefully in his grandmother's arms, and everyone present felt the weight of something sacred. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, choosing each other again with full knowledge and complete certainty. The reception was informal. A barbecue in the backyard, games for the children, laughter and stories. Alessandro's business associates who attended looked bewildered by the casual nature of it all. They were used to seeing him at formal events, rigid and controlled. This man, playing tag with his daughter while holding a beer, was someone they didn't recognize. That night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Alessandro and Sofia lay together under the stars. The lake was quiet, the world at peace. "Tell me something," Sofia said softly. "Anything. If you could go back to that day in my office, knowing everything you know now, would you change anything?" Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he pulled her closer. "No, not a single moment, because every choice, every mistake, every fear, they all led here. To you, to our children, to this life. I wouldn't risk changing any of it. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts," Alessandro said firmly. "They taught us how to fight for each other, how to choose love, even when it's complicated." Sophia smiled against his chest. "We did good, didn't we? We built something real. We built something forever," Alessandro agreed, "and we're just getting started." As the years continued to pass, their love deepened in ways neither had anticipated. They faced challenges. Parenthood wasn't always easy. Balancing careers required constant negotiation. Life threw curveballs that tested them. But they faced everything together, their foundations strong enough to weather any storm. Isabella grew into a bright, confident child. At 5 years old, she had her father's business mind and her mother's compassion. She was protective of her younger brother, bossy in the way oldest siblings often are, but fiercely loving. Lucas was gentle and artistic, content to spend hours drawing while his sister planned world domination. He had his father's intensity, but his mother's softness. The two children were different, but close, united by the security of parents who loved them unreservedly. Alessandro's relationship with his own past changed too. He established a foundation in his mother's name, funding cancer research and treatment for families who couldn't afford care. It was Sophia's idea, a way to transform his pain into purpose. "Every family we help," she had said, "is another miracle, another life saved, another chance given." Sophia's teaching career flourished. She became principal of her school, transforming it into a model program that other districts studied. She never forgot where she came from, never lost touch with the desperation that had driven her to Alessandro's office. It made her better at her job, more compassionate, more determined to give every child a fighting chance. Elena lived to see both her grandchildren grow, her cancer remaining in remission year after year. She would often tell people she had been given a miracle. But what she told Sophia privately was different. "I didn't just get more time," she would say. "I got to watch you become who you were meant to be. That's the real gift." On their 5th anniversary, Alessandro and Sophia returned to that cafe in Soho. But this time they brought Isabella and Lucas. The children were excited for the adventure, dressed in their best clothes on their best behavior. The cafe owner remembered them. He brought out cookies for the children immediately, his face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Your parents," he told Isabella and Lucas as they munched on treats, "they gave this old man faith and love again." Alessandro and Sophia watched their children, hands intertwined across the table. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting everything in golden light. "How did we get here?" Sophia asked softly. "To this moment, this life. One choice at a time," Alessandro replied. "One moment of courage, one leap of faith. You walked through my door when you had every reason to turn back. I let down my walls when every instinct told me to keep them up. We chose each other over and over again." "And you'd make every choice the same way?" Sophia asked, echoing their conversation from the vow renewal. "Every single one," Alessandro confirmed. Isabella looked up from her cookie, her dark eyes serious beyond her years. "Daddy, Mama, Will you tell us how you met? Someday, Sophia promised. When you're older. It's a complicated story. Alessandro caught Sophia's eye and smiled. It's a love story. The best kind. The kind that starts impossible and becomes inevitable. They walked out of the cafe into the Chicago afternoon, a family of four now, complete and whole. And if you look closely, you might have seen the ghosts of who they had been. A desperate woman with everything to lose. A lonely man who didn't know what he was missing. The moment their eyes met for the first time, the instant that changed it everything. Because that's the magic of real love. It takes our most vulnerable moments, our most desperate hours, and transforms them into foundations for forever. Alessandro and Sophia's story wasn't about a contract or a transaction. It was about two wounded people finding the courage to stay when everything said to run, about building trust from fear, love from loneliness, family from fragments. In the end, Alessandro got his heir and so much more. And Sophia saved her mother's life while finding her own. That evening, back at the lake house, the children played in the yard while Alessandro and Sophia sat on the porch watching them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isabella was teaching Lucas how to catch fireflies, patient in a way that made Sophia's heart swell with pride. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Sophia asked. "When you told me this wasn't business anymore?" Alessandro smiled. "I remember every word of every conversation we've ever had. You said you needed to know what it was about me that made you want to break every rule you'd set for yourself. Did you ever figure it out?" Alessandro turned to look at her, his ice blue eyes as intense as they had been that first day, but warmer now, filled with a love he no longer tried to hide. "Yes, it wasn't one thing, it was everything. Your strength in the face of impossible circumstances. Your willingness to sacrifice for the people you love. The way you looked at me like I was human, not just a bank account or a business opportunity. You saw me, Sophia. Really saw me, and you weren't afraid of what you found." "I was terrified," Sophia admitted. "But you stayed anyway. That's courage. That's what love is. Staying when you're terrified. Choosing each other when it would be easier to walk away." Isabella's laughter rang out across the yard as she finally caught a firefly. Lucas clapped his hands in delight. Two children who would never know the desperation that had brought their parents together. Who would grow up secure in the knowledge that they were loved, wanted, cherished. "That's our legacy," Alessandro said softly, watching them. "Not the business empire, not the money. Them. The family we built. The love we chose. That's what matters." Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder. "From one night to forever. From impossible to inevitable," Alessandro agreed. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they called their children inside. Bath time, story time, the rituals of family life that had become more precious than any business deal or society event. Isabella wanted 3 stories. Lucas fell asleep halfway through the first, and when both children were finally settled, Alessandro and Sophia stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching them sleep. "Thank you," Alessandro whispered. "For what?" "For saving me. I thought I was saving you, paying for your mother's treatment, giving you a way out of desperation. But you saved me, Sophia, from a life of emptiness dressed up as success, from becoming my father, from missing the only things that truly matter." Sophia took his hand, pulling him away from the nursery, down the hall to their own room. "We saved each other. That's what love does. It rescues us from the lives we thought we had to live and shows us the lives we were meant for." They made love that night with the windows open, summer air drifting through, carrying the scent of lake water and wildflowers. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked until sleep claimed them, talked about dreams for their children, plans for the future, memories of how far they had come. And if that night in the quiet darkness, Alessandro whispered thank you to the universe for the desperate woman who had walked into his office asking for a miracle, and if Sophia whispered thank you for the lonely man who had given her more than money, who had given her love and purpose and a life beyond imagination, well, those were prayers that deserved to be answered. Because some love stories don't start with meet cutes or love at first sight. Some start with desperation and contracts and transactions that should have been cold. But the best love stories, the ones that last, the ones that transform, are the ones where two people choose each other despite everything, where impossible becomes inevitable, where one night becomes forever. And Alessandro and Sophia Blackwell, formerly strangers bound by contract, now partners bound by choice, had built exactly that. A love story that started impossible and became inevitable. A family born from desperation but sustained by devotion. A forever that began with a single signature and endured through 1,000 daily choices to stay, to love, to build something that mattered. That was their legacy. Not the money, not the empire, but the love they chose every single day. The family they built one moment at a time. The impossible made inevitable through courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to believe that sometimes the most broken beginnings lead to the most beautiful forevers.